Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is season 4 of the Question Guy podcast. Yay, me. I'm here with Krista Hernandez, and we're going to dive into a conversation that I'm having more and more, especially with the Envision Speaker Series, which is my new podcast going out this year. Krista's going to talk to us about the problems with modern medicine and the problems she faced with that and how she overcame that because she understands what it means to be her holistic self. Krista, where does this conversation get started?
Well, first off, Keith, thank you so much for having me on the show. So, this story actually began 24 years ago when I was 12 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, so it started in a noisy middle school gym, actually just about 24 years, September. So, it all started with the most benign of things. I leaned back on the bleachers and my wrist was just killing me, just pain. And over the next few months, that pain spread to pretty much every joint in my body. And they couldn't find any structural damage, not at urgent care, not for my pediatrician. They were, looking at the wrist at first. And then when things started to spread, there were no answers whatsoever.
Hmm.
So it started with that, the joint pain, where sometimes it was difficult to walk. It was so stiff and painful. And then it moved into muscle weakness, um, incredible fatigue, insomnia, where, I was just walking through school like a zombie.
Wait, you're like 12. This is 12 years old.
Yeah.
And, and I empathize because my daughter's 13, so I can only imagine. I know she cries with an earache. I can only imagine what you're going through.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. And I had a lot of symptoms at the time too that I didn't know were symptoms. I didn't know it was a symptom that my lips were constantly cracked and dry, that I was freezing all the time. I had tingling and numbness in my toes, my hands. I had what I didn't know at the time was POTS, the acronym always escapes me, but basically I couldn't stand up sometimes without falling down. I
Okay.
would get super lightheaded and dizzy. So I had all of these like crazy constellation of symptoms.
Huh.
And by like the following spring, I don't know if my pediatrician did the right thing. There's a fine line with doctors between admitting something is beyond your scope and passing the buck. I'm not sure which one he did. He sent me to a rheumatologist who didn't even bother to do any blood work on a 13-year-old whose thyroid was, practically painted in a neon sign because I was morbidly obese as a kid.
Hmm.
That should have been the first order of business. So without doing really any work whatsoever beyond a physical examination of pressure points, because I was like a giant bruise all over and bruised like a peach. We could see that with the skin to begin with. But she just declared that I had fibromyalgia, which I have thoughts on. Fibromyalgia is a very common catch-all that doctors love to diagnose women with when they can't be bothered to actually treat them, or they're too incompetent to find what's, truly going on in a woman's body. So she told me after not even a 30-minute appointment that this was just something I would have for the rest of my life. It would be painful. There's really no medicine we can give you. And you should get 30 minutes of exercise per day. All right. See you in 6 months.
What? Wait, how did well, I've had so many questions, but we only got a 30-minute show. That seemed that seemed asinine, to be quite honest.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Okay.
yeah. I've done a
And I
lot of work.
realize it's 24 years ago. I realize medicine may have been different. I mean, when I was diagnosed with asthma, I was told, don't aggravate it. So don't get involved with any sports. So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't until I was 14. And then I said, I had a major asthma attack. And I said, I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did your parents do at this point? Like what's going on in the family?
That's a whole other can of worms. So
Okay.
as part of my healing process, I actually cut off my biological family 3
Oh,
years ago.
oh, so there's lots of things going on here.
A
Oh,
lot of things going
okay.
on in there.
You
And that
mentioned
was,
you were obese.
yes.
Now you're talking about removing your family from your life. You've got a sickness. Krista, is anything going right in your life at this
Well,
point?
this was 3 years ago. I was 33 when
Okay.
I said enough is enough. I can't have this
Because
toxicity in my life.
you lived with all this mess
Yeah. There
for
was a
tw
lot of chaos and toxicity, and also what I didn't understand as abuse at the time. It took me many years to understand, and I think more Americans are understanding narcissistic abuse these days. There were other things going on as well, other psychiatric issues in the home that aren't necessarily mine to tell, so we won't go there today. But let's just say I didn't have much support
as a
at
kid
home.
growing up.
No.
Okay.
And I did not have much support in dealing with this. I was pretty much on my own. I begged for a treadmill so I could get that 30 minutes because I was like, oh, this doctor told me this is what I should do. I'm a kid. I'm going to listen. So I begged for a treadmill and I pushed myself, and I mean pushed myself, unfortunately, to get that 30 minutes a day, no matter what. And I also took it upon myself to overhaul my diet entirely, cutting out pretty much all the junk. I was obese, standard American diet, Italian household. So grandma was always, shoving God knows what down my throat. And so I lost a significant amount of weight on my own. And I also begged for a laptop from grandma and grandpa so I could just try and help myself. The internet was still kind of in its infancy for regular people, but I was looking for support groups. I was looking for any kind of information. And somehow eventually I found a corrective chiropractor in town. And I consider him one of the people that helped save my life because turns out you can actually have a backward spine. And I did.
Wow.
My spine was curved the wrong way.
Oh,
Yeah.
wouldn't that have been picked up by the initial doctors? I don't know, what, MRI or
They didn't do anything.
something?
They
Oh,
didn't do anything. All they did was x-ray my wrist. That was it. When the
but you
initial
said that
pain set
the
in.
pain was spreading.
Mm-hmm.
So that must mean it's not just your wrist. Okay. And I'm a doctor, but I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm not going
Yeah.
to go into that. So you found out that there is, or there may be a cause to all this stuff.
Yes. And in hindsight, I know that was definitely part of it. I had so many structural problems going on and so many skeletal issues. So the top of my spine was putting pressure on my brainstem. So for a year, I went 3 times a week to this chiropractor, and he would do the adjustments. But then I would spend about 15 to 20 minutes in traction. So he would hook this apparatus around a Velcro thing around my head, and he would attach a weight, sand weights, to the back of it. And I would literally hang there with my head slowly for a year, fixing the curvature of my spine. And yes, it's as painful as it sounds.
But I'm hoping there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
The light there was that for the next 4 years, that treatment allowed me to live a pretty normal life. It allowed me to get a job and work and go to college. Unfortunately, so I got several of those fibromyalgia misdiagnoses. What I actually had was lupus.
Oh,
I
wow.
had lupus and its little subsymptom cousin, Hashimoto's disease, which is autoimmune hypothyroidism.
Okay.
And I also had a very mild type of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a hypermobility issue. So my joints were super loose. My ligaments were all loose. And fortunately, I've never dislocated anything, very mild, but put that all together and you've got quite a mess on your hands if no one knows how to treat you and you're undiagnosed. And lupus is cyclical. So by the time I hit 21, everything came crashing down again and symptoms came back, and I ended up getting re-diagnosed with fibromyalgia. But I found a physiatrist then, which is a doctor of rehabilitative medicine and pain management. That's a thing. And she discovered 4 bulging discs in my spine at that point, along with
So with the treatment of realigning it, There's still bulging discs.
because the systemic issues at the cause of it were not addressed.
Okay.
And I honestly, I cannot fault a chiropractor for not finding lupus. You know what I mean? Everyone's got their own specialty. The man saved my life. Um, just one of a few practitioners who did. So uh, the bulging discs, I had bursitis in both knees. I had muscular atrophy in various places. Basically, my body couldn't hold itself up. I was like Humpty Dumpty. And I spent 4 months at physical therapy at what was supposed to be the best PT place in New Jersey, which I'm from, in case you can't tell. um, so 4 months there. And it was the kind of thing where they kind of should have seen some things, but instead they kind of looked at me. I felt like I was in an episode of Seinfeld at times because they'd be moving my legs around. Everybody would come around like, oh, this is interesting. She shouldn't be able to move her legs out that far. Why don't she just pass out when we put her arm up to the wall like this? And I had these like crazy sympathetic reactions sometimes. But again, that, patched me up just enough for a while so that I could live normally. And I did for a while. I thought I still had symptoms I didn't know were symptoms. And I went through a divorce in that time as well, because as a teenager, it was chaos at home, just an awful environment. And I escaped one bad environment for another. And I ended up getting married at 21. It's a terrible idea. I fixed it a year later. I was divorced at 22. And fortunately, I met the love of my life. And Pete and I have been married for almost 12 years now, married to him and the Air Force. So we've moved 6 times in the last 10 years. And so that's been, a crazy time. And in that time, I've done a lot of experimentation. I was doing, even before I got the true diagnoses, I was experimenting a lot with mostly diet and exercise. And it was in 2015 that symptoms really came back with a vengeance. And that coincided with my husband being stationed in Korea for a year, ending up living with my parents again, long story. And that's when I discovered, it was in 2016, just trying to survive in that house for 9 months, I discovered the work of Louise Hay and Wayne Dyer. And I really dove into the concept of the mind-body connection. I can remember very clearly, in my parents' basement, the only place I had privacy is standing in front of the mirror, doing EFT, trauma tapping, staring at my reflection in the mirror, because I am a bull in a china shop. So if I can do something to supercharge that exercise, I'm going to do it. And that was the mirror work. And I took energy classes nearby. And I got into sound healing a little bit. I started with binaural beats, but I really read Louise Hay's books and Wayne Dyer's and watched his PBS specials. And that really like kickstarted a mindset shift for me. But unfortunately, the symptoms really came back with a vengeance. And when we moved to San Antonio, I thought then, oh, you know what? I'm in such a great place for medicine. Let me do something I've never done before. I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to go to every specialist I can find. I had an endocrinologist, a gastroenterologist, an allergist, because I had all these crazy issues. And I swear to you, Keith, they were going to kill me. If I kept going to all of them, they were going to kill me. I was just getting sicker and sicker between all the different meds they had me on. Thyroid medication. It's just, it's poison. So much of it is just poison. And so the last straw appointment was, and I was on my own for this because my husband was gone a lot for trainings. Actually here in Maryland, oddly enough, he would be gone for 3 months at a time. And I had this cardiologist appointment, and I go in there and he saw the meds I was on. And I started telling him about all the thyroid issues I had, the Hashimoto's and other symptoms going on. And he goes, oh, wait. I don't need to hear about all that metabolic stuff. I'm just here for your heart. As if they
I've got a
weren't all,
cardiologist too.
Yeah, but as if they weren't all connected. Like, he missed that day in med school, but he didn't because they don't actually teach them that in medical school. They compartmentalize everything.
Yeah.
That was the last straw. He wanted an EKG and all this stuff. I ran out of his office into my car and I just cried at the
Wow.
curb in my car. So when I got home from that, and I strongly advise against this, don't ever, ever do this, anybody.
Listening, everybody.
I grabbed all my medications, opened the bottles, and threw everything in the trash in one shot.
Again,
Reckless.
that's a no-no.
Yes, that's a
Not all at
no-no.
one time anyway.
Reckless, irresponsible, and I'm fortunate. All it gave me was crippling anxiety for a couple of days, which it was dealing with already. It just like intensified it even more. I was willing to deal with that for a few days to get that junk out of my system because they just kept upping it and upping it, and it was creating more symptoms. That snowball effect. So the next day, I made an appointment with an acupuncturist, and I never looked back. I have never gone back to Western medicine since.
And that was when? Date, please, year?
That was 2019.
Okay. So we're still young in this. You're still in your infancy of 4 years with an acupuncturist.
Yeah, so it started with acupuncture, and he was also certified in Chinese medicine. So I was doing the weekly acupuncture appointments along with herbal blends. Scott was the best. So every 3 months, based on my symptoms and progress, he would change up the herbal blend. And slowly I started healing bit by
So
bit.
before we go into that, talk to
Sure.
us about herbal blends. What do you I'm not into it, so you got to educate me.
Basically Chinese herbs. So plants, herbs, ground up into powders, mostly disgusting tasting powders. But when you're that sick, you deal with it. You pinch your nose and you swallow.
Oh, you got to intake internally.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was tough at first because there was a regimen to that. I had to take those herbs at certain times in certain ways. So I was kind of scheduled out. I couldn't eat a certain amount of time beforehand. This is why I say healing takes work. You have to be willing to do that kind of practical work as well as all the emotional work that
Well,
I've
I want
been
to get to
doing.
that. I want to deal with your physical, and then I want to tap into what's going on emotionally and psychologically with you. And
Yep.
so you've got acupuncture, you're taking oils, herbs.
So herbs, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I've dabbled a little bit in essential oil since, but yeah, it was mostly herbs at the time.
Okay. And then after the herbs, what's next for you
So,
physically?
So I moved from acupuncture into naturopathic medicine. I thought I was just getting a massage from Groupon one day, and it turns out the massage therapist was also a licensed naturopathic physician.
So did you luck out or was this planned?
I had no idea. I thought it
Okay.
was just a massage.
Okay. So you did
She
luck out.
offered, oh, yes, yes. She is my angel. I still work with her virtually. She was the one who discovered the lupus. She had me on her table for an hour and literally read my body like a map and was asking me all these questions about my history. I didn't realize she was a doctor. And at the end of it, she started explaining why she was asking these questions. She was smart not to tell me right away, or else I would have gotten scared. Um, and then she did the blood work to confirm. So there was definitely a mix of, the things people are used to, the blood work, checking levels, looking at, the autoimmune factor, supplementation as well, making sure I was on the right vitamins for my body. And the important thing there was she was outside of the insurance system. She was not bound by the rules insurance companies set forth because they're the ones who actually dictate medical procedures in this country. They are the ones who determine what tests people get, what medications people get, what they're screened for. If you're a woman, good luck even getting the entire thyroid panel even tested, let alone finding a doctor who knows how to read it properly. It's a horrendous system. So that is a big part of my mission, is to help women move away from that system. So we worked on that, supplementation, as well as lymphatic drainage, toxins. We worked on some dietary changes. I moved back to yoga, which is, to me, I mean, I've gone back and forth. I go through different phases of exercise depending on what my body tells me it needs. But in my opinion, yoga is the best bang for your buck in terms of exercise and just body, mind, spirit connection all in one. I was just doing a yoga practice literally yesterday, trauma informed yoga for the hips. I had to stop halfway through because I was crying all over my yoga mat. So
Before the end of the show, we need to go back to your doctor. I need to get your doctor's name. But now that we are tapping into you crying, all of this had to bring about some type of change with Krista.
oh yes.
Something's going on with you. Your emotions are being torn. Your understanding of the world has been torn apart. Uh, how are things being put back together?
So in order to fully heal, I had to really dig deep and figure out what caused these physical issues in the first place. Because I want to make something very clear. Some people are going to think that I'm saying it's a person's fault if they develop a chronic illness, because I'm going to say that emotional issues are at the root of these physical issues. That doesn't mean they're not real. Okay. And we are not in control of how emotions manifest as illness in our bodies. Certainly not as children either, you know?
Right.
So I had emotional issues that definitely caused the lupus to come out when I was 12 and attack. And I had to deal with the practical side. I had to deal with the physical effects of that condition and its very real manifestation, but I also had to deal with the emotional issues at the root of it. So for that, my biggest tool has been EFT, and that's tapping on a few points throughout the body. It helps you peel back the layers.
Talk to me about the acronym, please. EFT?
Emotional freedom technique.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've used that. I can't even tell you how many hours. I think Malcolm Gladwell would call me an expert, my 10,000 hours with EFT. So that's been a huge tool. Right now, I'm doing a lot of guided meditation chakra work. Reiki has been invaluable, as well as just, reading books on these subjects as well. There is one book in particular that it should be on the bookshelf of everyone in America. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. I recommend it to pretty much everyone I talk to.
The body keeps its score?
The Body Keeps the Score.
The body keeps the score. Okay.
Yes, it's by a doctor who's very Dutch and whose name I cannot pronounce.
Okay.
But it's amazing. So yeah, those have been invaluable tools in cultivating, the vibrant health that I now enjoy. I do now consider myself a fully healthy person. I can give you a date on that too. As of this past May 28th, at a very emotional Reiki appointment.
So talk to me about what that statement really means. What does that mean? That you are now completely healthy, whole, holistic, without problems?
So at that appointment, Reiki is it's an energy practice. It's hard to describe to somebody who's never done it. So laying down on a table, kind of in a meditative state, you might fall asleep. I've fallen asleep. I did in this session. And your practitioner does, energetic healing work on your body, because we are all energy when it comes down to it. And at that session, she saw a particular shade of golden light around my head in the last 10 minutes. And I know this might be too woo-woo, as they call it, for a lot of people.
The audience will have to get used to it.
Yeah, for a lot of people who might be listening. And I was absolutely, I want to make that clear, I was totally one of those people in the past. Absolutely one of those people who mocked that kind of thing, who thought it was silly. And that was just my own fear talking. That was my own resistance, because there's really two emotions in life: fear and love. Everything else comes off of those two emotions.
Is that what your energy teacher taught you?
That is what I believe at my core.
Okay.
From everything I've learned, from everything I've read, everything stems from either fear or love.
Well, you had this gold aura around your head. So what does this mean?
Yes. So for the last 10 minutes of the session, and I was asleep. So I came out of it, and my practitioner Mia uh kind of let me get my bearings, and came back in for like the post Reiki briefing, as I think of it. And she told me about this light, and that in the hundreds of people she's worked with, she's only seen that particular energy on a person once before.
And that
And that
meant,
and that energy represented the healing and release of all disease. She said, "You
hmm,
did the work."
congratulations.
Thank you.
Did you
It was
put
a
that
big
date on the
day.
calendar?
Oh, it's right up here.
Oh, okay.
Right up here. It's also my brother-in-law's birthday, so I won't forget
Okay, awesome.
it.
Does he know the correlation?
Oh no, he doesn't have a clue. I
Oh,
doubt
oh,
he has any clue what Reiki is.
okay. That's okay. So it begs the question here, at least for me and probably the audience, how are you doing today, right now?
I have zero regrets. There is no place in the world I'd rather be, no other timeline I want to be in. I'm a big Marvel fan, at least a fan of the Infinity Saga, so I got to throw that in there a little bit. But I came back from vacation not that long ago. If you had told me, you know, 15 years ago that I'd be in a kayak someday, I would have said you're nuts. Kayaking out into the Chesapeake Bay without any fear, without any pain, enjoying myself for a week in quiet, a lot of quiet contemplation and meditation. Um,
So you're
that
saying you came down to my neck of the woods and you didn't invite me on a kayak? Daggone.
we were still in Maryland. Um, but enjoying running um, on our new treadmill that we got for both of us. But I wanted that goal. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time. That previous limits, I wasn't able to. Just the fact that it's the little things. It's not being tired during the day. It's being able to play with my dogs whenever I want, being able to have them and give them the lives they deserve, being able to support my husband in all the military craziness we have, in the 12-hour alternating day-night shift schedule that we're starting next week. It's being able to run a business and run my household at the same time. And I can't even describe how amazing it feels to be able to help others do this.
Well, that's our next conversation. So you're going to come back on Coach's Corner, right?
Yes,
And talk about what that means as a business.
absolutely. Because for me, it's all part of it. I couldn't work for 5 years because I was so sick. And even before that, so I graduated college in 2009 with a sociology degree, um, which meant I was unemployed for some time and trying to scrape by. And I was falling back on childcare, which I had done previously. I had been a cashier at a grocery store. When you're good with kids, childcare is always a good fallback, especially military spouses are notoriously and underemployed because of
Mm-hmm.
the challenges we face.
Yeah, transitions. Yeah, yeah.
And then eventually I got too sick to work at all. And that was devastating. That did a number on me mentally. And it just, that was a big goal for me, was to be able to work again. At first it was, I don't care what I do. And then I always had a little bit of that entrepreneurial spirit inside of me, because too, I needed the flexibility of that. If it was going to happen, I needed the flexibility of being my own boss, making my own hours, to uh, be able to put my own health and needs first.
Right. And we're going to get to that story in a couple of days, I do believe. But before we leave this call, I want you to give it something else because you've given our audience so much so far. Just one more thing,
Sure.
please. And your specialty is working with women who are in chronic illness.
Yes,
Yes.
who have various autoimmune diseases, or let's say PCOS, endometriosis, the ever popular fibromyalgia, lots of different conditions in there in that umbrella.
You mentioned the word fear, and it was really correlated between uh, wanting to appreciate Western medicine and then moving into something entirely different because it's unknown.
Mm-hmm.
How do you cross that fear boundary? Please tell those who are listening and watching how to cross it.
Well, number one, you have to be willing to deal with it. We all have it inside of us. No one is exempt from fear, you know, and there's always some kind of trauma. There's always some kind of issue at the root of it. So whether we're aware of it or not, we have to be willing first to deal with it. And then you've got to do the work. It's not going to be fun. It's going to be painful. It's going to be scary. And it's never going to end. That's the key. We're humans. So it's going to change. It's going to vary. And if you do the work, it is absolutely going to get better. And your life will improve tremendously. But it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you've got to be willing to be very honest with yourself, with those around you, and you better get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Krista, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for joining me on the Question Guy podcast in season 4. For those of you who are watching and listening, I'll see you next time. Take
Thanks so
care.
much, Keith.
Absolutely.